through what are called in the Christian church spiritual practices or spiritual disciplines. And there are ways that the Christian, in the Christian faith, the ways in which we can connect with God more, connect with Him deeper, the way that we can kind of, as you see in the picture, put the puzzle of our life together. These practices are not the way we get to heaven. That's by grace, that's by faith, that's because of what Jesus did for us. They're not the way we earn God's love, but rather they're the way that we deepen in His love by putting these into practice. And I hope you put some of these into practice. I've heard, as I've talked to people, that various folks have tried some of these disciplines, and they have wonderful, wonderful spiritual and practical benefits. You really, if you start doing some of these, and they're all listed up here, the 12, you'll start to see things differently in your life. You'll start to find a little more contentment. I promise you that you will. And these disciplines are meant to train us. They're meant to exercise our Christian faith and to grow us. And so they're of value because, the church for centuries, for thousands of years, the church and Christians have been doing these things, these 12. They've been practicing them every day, every week, as a way to get connected to God. And today we come to one that's rather difficult. Probably, I'm going to say, one of the more difficult for us, you and me, to put into practice. And it's the discipline called simplicity. Simplicity. Now, it's not something that you hear talked about a lot, and it's hard for us in the city because the definition of simplicity is how we as Christians live a simple life. Simple. Bare. How we live a simple life that is free from anxiety and worry. The definition of simplicity is, can you live a life in which you can give up some things in order to uncomplicate your life? But because you and I live in a city like Seoul, because you and I especially have fast-paced jobs, very busy schedules, a lot of network contacts, a lot of people that you are interfacing with on a consistent basis, you have a lot to do in a day. You have a lot of things to think about in terms of your bank account and your salary and promotions and your future and your plan. And so it's almost enough to make you just lose it. And living in a city, because it's so fast-paced, makes this even more difficult. See, this message would be a lot easier for me to preach if we were all on a farm today. Because that's what simplicity is. It's like when you and I go camping. If you have ever gone camping, I'm sure most everybody here has. When you go camping, is the minute that you start to realize, you know that feeling of camping, when you start to realize, wow, I don't really need all that stuff at my home. Like my stove, my microwave, I don't need it. I have a great fire here. Lamps, lights, well, it's great out here. We have fire. A nice, comfortable, big bed. I could sleep in a sleeping bag. See, camping is, living on a farm, camping, whatever it may be, takes life down to the bare essentials. And throughout the tradition of the church, Christians have been trying to practice the discipline of simplicity. How can you and I strip down our lives so that it is simple and so that, as Jesus will show us, we're not filled with anxiety. We're not filled with worry. We're not constantly stressing about tomorrow. We're not stressing about the future and its plans and what's going to happen, but rather, we have clarity. We have a lightness about us. Now, the context of this passage, most of the disciplines that I've been talking about in context of Jesus giving a sermon, a very famous one called the Sermon on the Mount. And really all this is Jesus is telling his followers how to live their life the way that it was always meant to be lived. That's all he's saying. It's not some rule book. It's not some grand plan. He's just saying, listen, it's simple. It's very, very simple. And today, he has this long passage where he talks about money and anxiousness, or anxiety and worry. And he connects these two things, money and the simple life. And I said the word money. I struggled with this. If you were here last week, I told you that I once had a seminary professor who used to categorize sermons. And he said, if you preach about this type of subject, it could be boring, and he called it, I said last week, a lights out sermon, meaning that when you start talking, the lights go out in people's heads. This is just so boring. He said, that's a lights out sermon. And last week was kind of one of those about Bible study. This week, he said, if you ever preach about money, he called it a bye-bye sermon. And he said the reason why is because when you start to preach about money, you be prepared to say bye-bye to a lot of the people in your congregation. And he was serious. Well, he was joking, but he was kind of serious. And he said, the more that you preach about the money to your congregation, the more you're going to have to say bye-bye. Because a lot of people don't want to sit there and listen to it. And I've struggled with this. If you guys have been here for the last couple years or so, I've shied away from talking about money. I've done the exact opposite direction because I didn't want a bye-bye sermon. I'm hoping today's not a bye-bye sermon, and if it is, then you got cupcakes afterwards. Maybe that'll bring you back for more. I can't avoid talking about it today because Jesus doesn't avoid talking about it. Jesus is almost obsessed with talking about money. He talks about money and wealth as much, if not more, than any other thing that he talks about in his ministry. He puts it in parables, Luke 18 and Luke 7. He uses it in Proverbs, Luke 9:25. He gives it in warnings, Luke 11. Jesus, you could imagine if you're one of his followers, and you're like, Jesus, just give it up already. Why do you have to talk about money all the time? I get it, money, money, money. Jesus is talking about money because he wants us to see that the ability for you and me to live a simple life is directly connected to our perspective and our use of money. And this is what he does in this passage today in Matthew 6. And this is, I guarantee you when Jesus preached this was a bye-bye sermon for him too. I'm sure a lot of people said bye-bye to him when he talks about treasure, and he talks about wealth, and he talks about your clothing, and he talks about worry, and he talks about anxiety. Jesus wants us today to see how the gospel can help you and me to start living a more simple life, a more calm life, a more worry-free life. And the best way that I could illustrate this, and you got to bear with me here, is Jesus gives you two options in regards to money. He gives you two options in regards to wealth and how we're going to look at it. Bear with me here. I'm going to fit Jesus with Gollum, yes, Gollum from Lord of the Rings, and the sparrow, okay? So somehow I'm going to connect Jesus, Gollum, and a sparrow. And Jesus is going to be, he doesn't exactly say it, obviously, because Gollum was written sometime later. But he says, listen, in regards to money, in regards to wealth, you are either going to be a Gollum or you're going to be a sparrow. Bear with me. I'll explain what I mean. And in order to do that, we got to look at money today because that's what Jesus does too. He gives us a glimpse on the power of money. He gives us a picture of the pressure that comes with money. And he gives us a view of the path away from it. The power, the pressure, and the path. And it's either going to be a Gollum or a sparrow. And he says, if you have the gospel, you can be a sparrow. If you don't have the gospel, you're going to be a Gollum. Now, you remember Gollum from Lord of the Rings. I think everybody's seen the movie or read the book. If you haven't, please do. Okay? I can't go into all the explanation, but you know Gollum, I'll explain it. Anyway, here, first, the power of money. If you look back at your passage, if you have a Bible or if you have your smartphone, look back. I urge you to. In Matthew 6, he's got this weird part in the middle, and it comes around verse 22 or so. He's got a weird part where he's talking about money, treasure, and then at the end he's talking about anxiety and material things, clothing, food, again, money sort of, and treasure. And right in the middle, sandwiched, is this weird part about an eye. Do you see this? He starts talking about the eye and the body. And I don't know about you, but I thought if I was following Jesus, I would be like, dude, slow down with the metaphors. Okay, you got treasure, eyes, body. anxiety and clothing and throwing the lilies and the birds, which we'll get to in a little bit. Surely his disciples would have said, what is this thing about the eye? And commentators have been struggling with it for years and years about what this eye does, what he's trying to communicate about the eye. And here's what he's trying to say. I'll sum it up this way. We all have eyes in this room. I'm looking at you. So we all have eyes, and I'm thinking that all of our eyes work okay. So if your eyes work okay, you feel the light in this room, okay? Now, if your eyes didn't work okay, even though there's light in the room, you wouldn't perceive it. Your eyes perceive the light, okay? Now, because your eyes perceive this light, you know that you are in a church right now, okay? If your eyes didn't work and you couldn't perceive the light, I could tell you that you are any number of places, and you could probably believe me. I could say we are in a barn surrounded by animals. And if your eyes did not work, you couldn't see the light, you probably wouldn't, well, that's a bad example because the smell would probably tip you off. Okay, but the point being this, your eyes are what help you see reality, Jesus is basically saying. Your eyes, if they work right, help you get to see the reality of your spiritual condition. Your eyes tell you about yourself. And Jesus knows this. Money, more than anything else in our lives, has the inordinate ability to blind us, to deceive us, to make us unaware of our spiritual condition. See, go back to Gollum here. Do you remember Gollum? He's in the cave, and it's dark, and he can't see, and he's got his ring, which he calls my precious. The ring he covets, the ring he has to have. And I guarantee you, if you were to go up to Gollum and say, Gollum, you have a problem with money. Gollum, you have a problem. Could you imagine that conversation? Having a sit down with Gollum and saying, I think you have a little problem with this ring thing. You're a little too dependent on the ring. You're a little too greedy. And actually there's a part where Frodo tries to tell him that he has a problem with the ring. And what is Gollum's instant reaction? No. I have no problem with this. And Gollum actually even talks to himself, remember this, to rationalize his obsession with this ring. See, when Jesus is talking about the eye, what he's saying essentially is this. The power of money is that it deceives you and me about the very dependency that we have on it, the very obsession that we have on it. Let me give even a more nuts and bolts example here, if Gollum's not working for you. Since I become a pastor, there's been this unique phenomena where people love to confess their sins to me, okay? And I enjoy it. Confess away, that's fine. You know, when I was in business, nobody confessed sins to me at all. Nobody told me anything about their life. And now I literally have strangers come up on the street to me before they even find out I'm a pastor, and they confess their sins. I'm talking like deep confession stuff that kind of freaks me out a little bit because I don't know this person, but I want to work with them, so I'll pray with them. To date, in the last couple years, I have never had one person come up to me and say, I think I have a problem with money. Never once. Because this is the power of money. This is the power against the simple life. Is that it deceives you and me. It's the most subtle of all. If you go down the list of those 7 deadly sins, gluttony, lust, and all those are all overt, proactive. I mean, you know when you're doing them. But greed on that list is unlike any of the other sins. It's the one that says, you don't really have a problem with this. It's okay to spend your money on that. It's okay to accumulate your money. It's okay to go for more money. It's okay to get more and more and more. And Jesus, by pointing out this thing about the eye, says this: money, above everything else, greed above everything else, will be the sin that deceives you, that to tell you that it doesn't even exist. Gollum, of all people, would never have admitted that he was greedy. He never would admit that he had a problem with the ring thing. Nobody wants to admit it. I don't even want to admit it. This was a hard thing to do. This is why we don't talk about money. It's a bye-bye message, because we don't want to hear it. But this is the truth, Jesus says. We all, everyone, has to some degree, some level of a problem with the way that we use money, accumulate money, spend it, earn it, and want it. And Jesus is going to say, that's the power of it, that it blinds you. The pressure, though, the power of it is that it blinds you, but the pressure of money, the pressure of wealth, the pressure of this particular thing, the pressure of what I'll call the unsimple life, is that it leads directly to anxiety. Look back at your passage in verse 25. Almost every time I've heard this message spoken, it's always been separated. Verse 25, though, if you look back, it says, therefore. There's a therefore. And when Jesus says therefore, what he's saying is these two things are connected. Don't disconnect them. They are connected. He says here, where your treasure is where your heart's going to be. Store up earthly treasure. Try to accumulate your salary. Try to build your bank account. Try to do all that. And therefore. And then he goes into this long speech about anxiety and worry. What Jesus is doing, he's showing Gollum again. He's saying, listen, to the degree that money has a captive role in your life is to the degree that which you will have deep anxiety, deep worry over the future, over your financial future, over how much you're going to get, how you're going to spend it, how much you can earn, what are you going to buy, he says. All of that will cause anxiety and worry for you. And of course, in Gollum, we see this anxiety and worry. He's the ultimate caricature of this. This little creature. Now he's, skinny. He's worn down over the years, barely any teeth in his mouth, gray hair, losing his hair, friendless, alone, and all he can do is murmur over and over about the ring, the precious. See, Jesus knows this. The reason why you and I have a hard time giving away our money, the reason that you and I have a hard time talking about money, dealing with money, is the fact that, like Gollum, we're obsessed with this thing, and the pressure leads to anxiety. It leads to the question, can I give this thing away and trust that it'll be there tomorrow? See, the pressure of money and wealth and all this accumulation of everything, materialism and everything in our culture, is that it just creates more anxiety. And Jesus does something awesome. Listen, I'm not against money. Money's fine. And Jesus, all throughout the Bible, it says, work for money, earn money, that's fine. Don't get me wrong. What Jesus is saying here is the inordinate pursuit of things in this earth that do not make us satisfied, that do not make us calmer, that do not make us less worrisome. He says those things will turn you into a Gollum-like character. Maybe not as bad as him, but you're getting there. And Jesus, as another thing, says, worry is not part of the Christian faith. Worry is against the Christian faith. He says, if you're a Christian motivated by the gospel, worry should not be a part of your life. Anxiety should not be a part of your life. But Jesus does something really cool at the end. I just want to do this before I move on. If you look back at the very last thing where he says, it depends on your translation. He says, tomorrow has enough worries, or tomorrow will worry for itself. Jesus is doing something really cool. He's doing something very logical. If you think about it this way, worry goes against common sense too. If you are a worrier, to worry means that you worry today about things that may or may not happen tomorrow. And what Jesus is saying here, and what John Stott, a commentator, put so well, he's saying worry isn't even logical. You worry today about something that may or may not happen tomorrow. You see how kind of silly that is? If you worry today and that thing happens tomorrow, say you worry about passing a test, you worry about getting a promotion, you worry about whatever it may be. He says if you worry today about that thing tomorrow and it doesn't happen, then you've wasted today worrying. But he says if you worry today about that thing happening and it does happen, now you have to worry twice because you're going to worry when it happens. Jesus is pulling off this masterful logical argument, saying that when you and I fear, when you and I worry, we only double up our pain. Because if we worry today about something that may or may not happen tomorrow, if it does happen, we've doubled our worries. And if it doesn't happen, then we've wasted today. All in all, Jesus is making a logical argument, saying that worry and anxiety fly in the face of common sense. But he's also making a spiritual argument to say that worry and anxiety fly in the face of the Christian faith. Now, the path. See, the power of it is that it tricks you into saying, no, we don't really have a problem with the way we spend our money. It's okay to buy these things. It's okay to accumulate material wealth. That's fine. That's fine. The power of money is that it does that. The pressure of it is that it leads directly to anxiety and more worry about accumulating more things. And Jesus gives us a path. He gives us such a great path. Remember I said I'm going to connect Gollum to Jesus and a sparrow. Here we go. Do you see what he says here? He says, look at the birds. Now, what does he mean? Look at the birds. He doesn't actually say it, but later on in Matthew 10, he'll say that these birds basically are sparrows. Now, a sparrow, let me give you a little information about a sparrow at the time. A sparrow at this time was a city bird. In the city, they were dirty. Ugh. They were cheap, super, super cheap. You can get about 2 for less than a U.S. penny, a penny in U.S. dollars. 2 of these. And the reason why they were so cheap, why you even had to buy them, was when you went to the temple to make a sacrifice. If you were very, very poor, and you went to the temple to make a sacrifice in the middle of the city, you had to bring an animal. But if you were poor, you couldn't afford one of the nice doves, the pretty white doves. You had to buy the dirty sparrow, the cheap ones, the city bird. The modern day equivalent would be a pigeon, okay? Jesus is saying, look at the pigeons. Do you ever stare at the pigeons in the city? They're worthless in the eyes of many people. People say they're rats with wings. They're dirty. Nobody wants a pigeon. But he says, look at them. He says, if you want to start to get on the path away from money and how it captivates you, and you want to go on a path towards a simple life where anxiety is not your captor, look at the birds. And the unique thing about the birds, pigeons, take a pigeon if you've never seen a sparrow. He says, look at the pigeons, look at the sparrows. They don't reap, meaning they don't work. Or they don't sow, meaning they don't work. They don't reap, meaning they don't harvest. And yet God takes care of them. And I meditated on this for a while. And I gotta say, I've never seen a stressed out pigeon. Have you? Think about it. Look around at pigeons. I've never seen a pigeon, but work with me a little bit here. Pacing back and forth, wondering how they're going to pay the bills. I'm sure pigeons feel stress. I once had a fish die of stress. So I'm sure pigeons feel some stress. But I've never seen a pigeon walking back and forth thinking about how they're going to get another little bump in their salary. You never see pigeons pacing back and forth worrying about the bills. They just don't do it. Pigeons are fat and they sit on a wire and they just hang out. They live probably one of the more stressed out lives unless people are chasing them away. He says, look, a sparrow's life is simple. A sparrow's life has no anxiety because the sparrow knows that there's somebody greater than him who's going to take care of him. Now, this, as another side note, don't walk out of here and think that I'm telling you all to go be pigeons and just sit around. I've never seen a pigeon stress out about money, but I've also never seen a pigeon sitting at home watching TV all day and not working. Pigeons have to get things for their nest. They get the twigs, they go get their food. Okay, fine. Christians, we have to work. I'm not advocating everybody quit your jobs and be lazy. That's not at all. The Bible does not at all say that. Rather, what Jesus is trying to say is, look, meditate on their lives. And then you'll start to connect to what a simple life could be. And there's an old hymn that says, and I put it in your outline, 'tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free, 'tis the gift to come down where you ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning, we come round right. 'Tis the gift to be simple. 'Tis the gift to be free. How is this possible? How do you become a sparrow? Let me close by saying this. The way that you become the sparrow is the gospel. I listened to a preacher actually preaching on this 2 weeks ago. And this preacher said, whenever you want to give away your money, just sing this song. God loves me, God loves me. I'm not going to sing for you, don't worry. God loves me, he loves me so. And he said, if you sing that song, you'll want to give away everything. And that is completely stupid. I'm sorry. It's not going to work. That's not going to help you and me give generously. That's not going to help you and me sacrifice our comforts, our finances. That's not going to help it just singing some song. You and I have to see somebody who gave us a gift so immeasurably valuable that we cannot do anything but give away our gifts. How do you get to be a sparrow? Remember 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Paul was writing to them and he says, "For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that by his poverty you may become rich." Now, I've heard a lot of people say that passage in the church, and it's very famous, but they forget what Paul's talking about. Paul's writing to the Corinthian church, and he's talking about the church in Macedonia. And if you read in 2 Corinthians 8, he says, this church in Macedonia is so poor. They are persecuted. They are beaten down. They have nothing. And yet they give, he says, beyond their means to others. They're the sparrow. Why? Because Paul says the church in Macedonia, though they are poor, know that there was one in Jesus who became poor for them, who gave up his wealth, his rights, so that when we call things our precious here on earth, we know that he calls us his precious there in heaven. They focused their gaze on Jesus, and money stopped controlling that church. And they were able to give. To summarize, the ability for you and me to give generously to one another, to get to sacrifice, to live a simple life, to review our perspective on money and wealth and what we accumulate in this world and material possessions, the ability for you and me to do that lies directly in the ability for you and me to see that he was the king who became poor. Now, if somebody gave you that gift, don't you consider it nothing to give such a small gift to someone else? To get rid of things, to live the simple life. How do you do it? I don't know. We got to close. It's up to you. It's your money. But if the gospel motivates you, you're going to be free from it. You don't need to be controlled by eventually the things you own end up owning you. And you don't need that, because now you know you're owned by somebody else. You don't need to call things here your precious, because he calls you precious. He's in control. You don't need to be. He says, be the sparrow, know that I am in control. And the proof of it was the cross. The proof of it was that I lost everything for you. Please pray with me.